Then I have an Article 2 where I have the right to do whatever I want as president.
More importantly, Article 2 allows me to do whatever I want.
And will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help me God.
In order for government to continue running, for the rule of law to remain intact, and even for us as citizens to maintain our sanity, we have to just ignore some of the stuff the president says. Sometimes the president says something out loud that endorses or encourages behavior that is so wildly unethical or even blatantly illegal that in order for the rule of law to be maintained, someone else from the government has to step in and remind people that no, actually, you cannot do that thing, even though the president just told you so. But a president who publicly, even gleefully tells Americans to break the law, you break the law, and you break the law. Let's all break the law together. I don't think this is something we've dealt with before, and every government official who is not the president has to decide every day how to navigate this new terrain.
We must not tolerate a president who lies about everything. Since taking office, he has made over 10,000 false or misleading statements.
President Trump has crossed 10,000 false and misleading claims. We review every speech,
every tweet, statement,
White House events, cabinet meetings, campaign rallies.
Really everything he says.
We list all possible factual claims that he has made.
And then we evaluate them, and if they're false or misleading, we add them to our database.
I've already started building the wall. We built large sections.
And some of those claims he's repeated literally hundreds of times. Here are the top three.
So we're building the wall. It started. And we started the wall. It's doing well. It's $1 billion.
We lost $500 billion.
300, 400, 500 billion dollars a year. Billion!
And for years, we were losing a tremendous amount of money.
We're losing a lot of money.
That's false.
It's just a false construct.
This country. It's the biggest tax cut
in American history.
This is the largest tax cut in the history of our country. The biggest tax cut, biggest reform of all time.
That's false. Trump's tax cut is the 8th largest in the last 100 years.
I cannot support a president who brags about his sexual exploits as just locker room banter.
Yeah, that's her, with the gold. I gotta use some Tic Tacs just in case I start kissing her. You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the pussy. Hello, how are you? Hi.
Trump, how
nice
are
seeing you. Terrific.
Pleasure to meet you.
Terrific. You know Billy Bush?
How are you?
Nice to see you. How you doing, Ariane?
I am disgusted by a president who has been accused of sexually assaulting 22 women, and has not been held accountable.
The President of the United States was accused of sexual assault. Again. In an article in New York Magazine on Friday, columnist E. Jean Carroll accuses Trump of sexually assaulting her in a Bergdorf Goodman dressing room 23 years ago. These accusations are specific, they are credible, and they are terrible. And they make Carroll the 22nd woman to step forward. 22 women.
I want this president out of office, because he made illegal hush money payments to cover up stories of his affairs with a porn star and a Playboy bunny.
Reducing the overall EPA budget by 34%. Reducing EPA grants to protect clean air and water by 40%. Eliminating funding to fight against climate change. Slashing the Department of Interior's National Parks funding. An overwhelming majority of Americans support a stronger and more expansive EPA, rather than massive budget cuts that threaten our rights to health and safety.
President Trump believes climate change is a hoax. We know this because he has said it over and over again.
So Obama's talking about all of this with the global warming and that, and a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry, okay? It's a hoax.
As far as my return, I want to file it, except for many years, I've been audited every year.
I'm sick and tired of a president who will not release his taxes. What is he hiding?
Hey, let's talk taxes! Trump's taxes. Now, a story the New York Times published this week is so devastating for the image of Trump as a guy who clawed his way to the top of the cash pile through sheer force of will. But here it is in one sentence. Donald Trump's financial successes were heavily funded by his father, Fred Trump. Let's take that small, Trump's words, loan of $1 million that he has acknowledged as all the help his dad ever gave him. Turns out that one loan was, according to the Times, more like many loans, totaling $60 million. That's 60 million. It's kind of a big difference. And that's just the money that Trump was given in loans. All told, the Times says that Donald Trump reaped more than $400 million from his dad's holding over his lifetime. And it makes this quote from a 2016 Republican primary debate just plain untrue.
I took $1 million and I turned it into $10 billion.
No. All of this great new reporting about where a large chunk of Donald Trump's wealth comes from, he got it the old-fashioned way. He inherited it. Explains a whole heck of a lot about why the president has been so resistant to ever releasing any of his tax returns.
What this New York Times report shows us was that it was always a scam. He was always losing money.
Well, this is the second chapter in a story that began by the same group of reporters at the New York Times in October when they wrote the piece about Fred Trump, Donald Trump's father, who actually gave Donald Trump all the money that he squandered over the years.
And it's something that will put a chill on all of his big rallies, and it is this: he pays no taxes.
No taxes.
So he's gone around the country. That's how partially he became president of the United States. The system is rigged. The elites are against you. The East Coast, hoi polloi, blah, blah, blah. He pays no taxes. Try that out when you're at a big rally.
I'm sick of a president who sets up phony charities to enrich himself.
Yesterday, in a New York court, the Trump Foundation agreed to dissolve after New York State prosecutors alleged that the fraudulent charity was little more than a checkbook to serve Trump's business and political interests.
This giant nappy-wearing blimp flew proud above the thousands who crammed London streets to protest against President Trump's visit. Many said that Air Force One can't take off back to Washington quick enough.
He's just everything that I really detest.
And was depicted as a schoolboy sat on a toilet writing tweets. A string of large anti-Trump demonstrations held in cities across the kingdom.
The Attorney General of New York, Eric Schneiderman, who joins us to talk about the civil lawsuit that you have now pending against Trump U.
More than 5,000 people were ripped off for millions of dollars.
Across the country or just in New York?
Across the country. But it was run as a New York university, held themselves out to be a New York university. In fact, was never registered, was never certified, didn't do any of the things you have to do to call yourself a university.
Donald Trump settled the lawsuit for $25 million.
Any guy that can do a body slam, he's my kind of... He's my guy.
A Montana man is charged with assaulting a 13-year-old boy who refused to move his hat during the national anthem, believed he was doing what President Donald Trump wanted him to do, his attorney said.
But I would have been boom, boom, boom. I'll beat that.
I don't know if I'll do the fighting myself or if other people will.
Maybe he should have been roughed up because it was absolutely disgusting what he was doing.
If you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, would you? Seriously. I'd like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you. Try not to hurt him. If you do, I'll defend you in court. Don't worry about it. Knock the crap out of him. I'd like to punch him in the face. We become weak. We become weak. And you know what? The audience swung back. And I thought it was very, very appropriate. The audience hit back. And that's what we need, a little bit more of. I don't know if I would have done well, but I would have been out there fighting, folks. I don't know if I would have done well, but I would have been boom, boom, boom. I'll beat that.
Do you plan on paying for the legal fees of this older gentleman in North Carolina who sucker punched the protester?
I've actually instructed my people to look into it, yes.
There have been 275 deaths from 255 mass shootings alone since January. More than 8,700 people have died from gun-related violence in the U.S. so far this year, and more than 17,000 others have been injured. Despite the crisis of mass shootings and the overwhelming support of over 89% of Americans, Trump and his administration still refuse to ban assault weapons as they continue to side with the NRA.
The entire country still in mourning, still in shock, reeling from the two mass shootings leaving 31 dead in Dayton and El Paso.
The weapons used in the past week, assault-style rifles, have been used in California, Texas, and Ohio. Chris Van Cleve looks at how weapons originally designed for the battlefield remain on America's streets.
Assault-style rifles are typically legal to buy and can be equipped to carry 30 rounds or more that can be fired in seconds. Mary Ellen O'Toole is a former FBI agent and profiler.
Why is it that time and again in these mass shootings, the suspect has gone out and used the assault-style rifle?
3 reasons. Kills as many people as possible, do it in a short period of time, and look as frightening and ominous as one possibly can.
If anybody wants to buy one, they can go
pretty much any flea market that sells guns or any gun show and buy something in the parking lot if they're so inclined.
The U.S. banned the manufacture of assault-style weapons for 10 years, ending in 2004. Earlier this year, the bill's author, Senator Dianne Feinstein, proposed a similar ban that stalled in the Senate.
President Trump took to Twitter this morning, trying to deflect a lot of the criticism he's getting this morning.
This is an invasion. It's an invasion. But how do you stop these people? You can't. There's no... That's only in the panhandle you can get away with that statement.
If you couldn't hear that response, that was someone in the audience saying, "Shoot them," to which the president said, "Only in the panhandle." Joining me now, Philip Rucker, White House bureau chief for the Washington Post, who wrote these words. After yet another mass slaying, the question surrounding the president is no longer whether he will respond as other presidents once did, but whether his words contributed to the carnage.
4 years ago, anti-immigrant rhetoric, racist rhetoric has been a hallmark and feature of his campaign, of his presidency. And according to experts in the field, it has inspired the white nationalist movement. That's why the manifesto that is at the center of the investigation in El Paso borrows so much of the language that President Trump has used at his rallies, in his tweets. And Trump is unapologetic about this. It is nonetheless a feature of his presidency, and that's why a lot of Democrats and others are saying through his words, he's culpable in this sort of carnage.
The counties that hosted Trump rallies in 2016 saw a 226% increase in hate crimes. 226% evidence that words do actually matter.
You have a president whose rhetoric is providing rocket fuel to the ideology that incites this violence.
And I think any Jewish people that vote for a Democrat, I think it shows either a total lack of knowledge or great disloyalty.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise with a sense of righteous indignation to support this resolution. I know racism when I see it. I know racism when I feel it. And at the highest level of government, there's no room for racism.
Okay, the comments from the president are just the latest in a long list of racially incendiary remarks from Donald Trump.
You also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
The White House isn't denying it. For now, Donald Trump isn't talking about it, but plenty of others have something to say about it.
This is a quote, "Why are we having all these people from shithole countries come here?" You can't dance around it. Those are the words of the President of the United States. It brings back to the fore the suggestion he is not only contemptuous but racist. He apparently suggested he prefer immigrants from places like Norway.
From the article that you wrote, it's hard to calculate the damage that President Trump's overt racism and almost daily attacks on black and brown people are having on the fabric of our nation. You mentioned former Vice President Biden's very strong speech today. Let me play a little clip of that. Listen to this.
How far apart are those comments? How far is it from white supremacists and neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, Trump's very fine people chanting, "You will replace us," to the shooter at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh saying, "We're committing genocide. Jews are committing genocide on his people." I don't think it's that far at all. It's both clear language and in code. This president has fanned the flames of white supremacy in this nation.
You agree with that assessment?
Absolutely.
This is The Daily Show with Trevor Noah.
In Donald Trump's America, everyone is speculating as to who should be the most afraid. Black people, Latinos, the English language.
Do you think Donald Trump is racist?
I do.
You do.
And I'll tell you why. It's tough to say that somebody is not racist when they're doing all the racist things.
President Trump is capping a week of racist rhetoric by claiming he disagreed with the disturbing chant that broke out at his campaign rally. On Sunday, the president tweeted that 4 Democratic members of Congress, all U.S. citizens and women of color, should go back to the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came. A racist trope that even the federal government considers to be discrimination officially.
Miss, please put your heart. Let my parents be free with everybody else, please. Don't leave the child with cryness and everything. My dad for me. My dad didn't do nothing. He's not
Hill. Child internment camps. That's what I said.
As the Trump administration's zero-tolerance immigration policy comes under fire, many up in arms as children are forcibly separated from their parents. All sides of the political spectrum united in what many say is a moral crisis unfolding on the southwest border. It was voices like this little girl's, heard in a recording, first obtained by ProPublica, that provided a glimpse into the consequences of the directive issued in April. The 6-year-old girl pleading repeatedly for someone to call her aunt. She is reportedly one of more than 2,300 children now separated from their parents. Some of these families fleeing violence and economic hardship in their native countries.
When I talk to these mothers and I say to them, would you have come here if you had known your child was going to be taken away? They just throw up their arms and say, what choice did I have? If I stayed in my country, I might have been killed. My son might have been killed. So it's essentially gratuitous cruelty.
Cages, chain link fences, shown in these images released by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The White House says the president doesn't want a quick fix. He wants immigration reform and his wall. Today, doubling down on his policy.
I don't want children taken away from parents. And when you prosecute the parents for coming in illegally, which should happen, you have to take the children away.
Once again, pushing the false claim that separating children at the border is required by law.
There is no law that mandates that when a family is captured by Border Patrol as they cross the border, that children should be separated from their parents.
But immigration advocates say that most who cross the border illegally are doing so to seek safety.
What's happened under this administration is the attempt to dehumanize immigrants and make it seem like they're all hardcore criminals, all members of gangs. If people would say, no, enough is enough, and it won't matter whether you're liberal or conservative. I think people are pushing, especially parents, thinking about if their 3-year-old or 4-year-old were in this situation, and they're saying, look, enough.
For Nightline, I'm Marcus Moore in Laredo, Texas.
Donald Trump's approval ratings are at an all-time low, but despite the statistics, he will never lose his most ardent supporters. For them, his cruelty towards people they hate and fear makes him the ideal president. For the past few years, we've watched President Trump hold these big rallies where he goes after his perceived enemies while audiences cheer. These events serve as big ego boosts for the president, but they also serve as community-building exercises where the president tells his biggest fans who they should hate. And it was then that I realized the cruelty is a big part of Trump's appeal for many of his strongest supporters. Separating children from their families at the border, leaving Puerto Rico to its fate after Hurricane Maria, revoking protections for undocumented immigrants brought to the U.S. as children, joking about police abusing suspects, mocking the women of the Me Too movement, or attacking football players for protesting police brutality. Trump's biggest backers enjoy his cruelty towards people they have decided deserve it. For them, the cruelty is the point. Now, taking pleasure in cruelty isn't unique to Trump supporters, but what Trump has done is take this human impulse toward cruelty and elevate it to a political virtue.
President's personal lawyer was alarmed at the prospect of the president meeting with Mr. McGahn to discuss Mr. McGahn's refusal to deny the New York Times report about the president trying to fire you, correct?
Correct.
In fact, the president's counsel was so alarmed by the prospect of the president's meeting with McGahn that he called Mr. McGahn's counsel and said that McGahn could not resign no matter what happened in the Oval Office that day, correct?
Correct.
So it's accurate to say that the president knew that he was asking McGahn to deny facts that McGahn, quote, had repeatedly said were accurate, unquote. Isn't that right?
Correct.
Your investigation also found, quote, by the time of the Oval Office meeting with the president was aware, one, that McGahn did not think the story was false, two, did not want to issue a statement or create a written record denying facts that McGahn believed to be true. The president nevertheless persisted and asked McGahn to repudiate facts that McGahn had repeatedly said were accurate. Isn't that correct?
Generally true.
I believe that's on page 119. Thank you. In other words, the president was trying to force McGahn to say something that McGahn did not believe to be true.
That's accurate.
I want to reference you to a slide, and it's on page 120. And it says, substantial evidence indicates that in repeatedly urging McGahn to dispute that he was ordered to have the special counsel terminated, the president acted for the purpose of influencing McGahn's account in order to deflect or prevent further scrutiny of the president's conduct towards the investigation.
It's accurate.
Well, thank you, Director Mueller, for your investigation into whether the president attempted to obstruct justice by ordering his White House counsel, Don McGahn, to lie to protect the president and then to create a false record about it. It is clear that any other person who engaged in such conduct would be charged with a crime. We will continue our investigation and we will hold the president accountable because no one is above the law.
Could you charge the president with a crime after he left office?
Yes.
You believe that you could charge the president of the United States with obstruction of justice after he left office?
Yes.
While in Singapore, Trump heaped praises on the leader, calling him talented and smart. Let's watch more of this.
Well, he is very talented. Anybody that takes over a situation like he did at 26 years of age and is able to run it and run it tough, you'd be very surprised. Very smart, very good negotiator.
Really, he's got a great personality. He's a, funny guy. He's a very smart guy. He's a great negotiator. I think he liked me and I liked him.
The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, a friend of mine, a man who has really done things in the last 5 years in terms of opening up Saudi Arabia, and I want to congratulate you. You've done really a spectacular job, and really terrific. As you know, Saudi Arabia is a big purchaser of American products and especially of American military equipment.
It was one of the most extraordinary moments between an American president and a Russian leader. Their meeting framed by Friday's Justice Department indictment of 12 Russian agents for election meddling and the judgment of U.S. intelligence agencies, including Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats, that Russia interfered. President Trump asked, who do you believe, President Putin or the U.S. intelligence community? His answer?
People came to me, Dan Coats came to me and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be.
The story that's playing out every day on our TV screens and Twitter feeds. He's getting worse. We can all see it. It's happening in public. But it's still a very hard, very sensitive story to cover. I'm talking, of course, about President Trump, about his behavior, about his instability, the contradictions, the lies, the complete rejection of reality. Some prominent figures, including the husband of Trump aide Kellyanne Conway, are pleading with the press to take this more seriously. On Friday, George Conway said Trump is decomposing before our very eyes. He said, quote, Republicans need to face up to the fact that the president is mentally unstable and psychologically unfit.
Before Lindsey Graham became a Trump worshiper, he said things like this.
He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot. He doesn't represent my party. He doesn't represent the values that the men and women who wear the uniform are fighting for. He's an opportunist. He's not fit to be president of the United States. And I don't think he has the temperament or judgment to be commander-in-chief. I think he's a kook. I think he's crazy. I think he's unfit for office.
As they say, the whole world is watching. Our mutual friend Eugene Robinson writes this. The astonishing thing is that the president of the United States is, let's face it, raving like a lunatic, and everyone just shrugs. The truth is that we don't have an actual presidency right now. We have a tiresome reality show whose ratings have begun to slide and whose fading star sees cancellation on the way.
Breaking news, President Trump goes off on an extraordinary rant, at times taking on a messianic tone. After retweeting a notorious conspiracy theorist who suggested that he's loved like the second coming of God, the president declared to reporters that he's, quote, the chosen one to take on China over its trade practices. Let's begin with CNN Chief White House correspondent Jim Acosta. And Jim, the president seems to have anointed himself today.
That's certainly right, Brianna. The president sounded as though he had something of a God complex at times today, declaring himself the chosen one and accepting praise from an ally who dubbed Mr. Trump on Twitter as the second coming. But the president wasn't so charitable when he doubled down on how he feels Jewish Americans should vote against Democrats and describing the prime minister of Denmark as nasty for rejecting his advances on Greenland. There were times when he sounded messianic and sometimes just a mess.
Donald Trump and his administration are facing hundreds of serious lawsuits, and Trump himself has been sued over 3,500 times.
Really bad news for Donald Trump. It has been unearthed from a 1990 interview with his former wife, Ivana, that Donald Trump allegedly kept a book of Hitler speeches on his nightstand. I mean, Lewis, you cannot write this stuff. He's had trouble recently over his views on race and immigration and Hispanic Americans and so on and so forth. And Ivana Trump indicated that from time to time, Donald Trump read Hitler's collected speeches. But it's just sort of the bizarre nature of everything surrounding Donald Trump.
He must be out of office before your Social Security is gone. Millions are stripped of their Medicare, and he eliminates more endangered species.
Before more lives are lost at the border, before his self-inflicted trade war becomes an economic disaster, and before he destroys the environment.